I'll be showing some video clips shortly, but before I do that, I wanted to share that several weeks ago I put out a video giving my first impressions on Anchorage, Alaska. 2 months later, I'm making this video to compare how I feel now about Anchorage. In my first video, a few viewers from Anchorage left me comments showing their displeasure that I was saying something negative about their hometown, particularly when I spoke about the high amount of drug use and homelessness in the city. Unfortunately, this video is not going to make them happier. This is something I see almost every day when I drive through Anchorage. I've seen people passed out like this on the sidewalk, at bus stops, and along roadsides. The next 3 video clips will show what I see 5 to 10 times every day while sitting outside for 3 hours. I didn't get everything on video. For example, the barefoot young girl who rolled around in the street and attacked the utility pole like she was Hulk Hogan. I also didn't get a video of when the maintenance guy and myself were sitting out on the front steps and were approached by some guy high on some drug holding a baseball bat. He just walked up to us and stared for about 3 minutes and eventually turned around and went on his way. And this final clip is what happened one morning to 4 of the 5 cars parked in the motel parking lot. 2 weeks later, some guy in his mid-30s stood across the street from the motel and yelled to us, "I smashed your windows because you all have red noses." Keep in mind, I don't live in one of the worst areas of Anchorage. The truth is, if you live in certain parts of Anchorage, for example near the airport or on the other side of Tudor Street, and you avoid driving through many parts of the city, or if you just turn a blind eye to what you're actually seeing, then of course homelessness and drugs and mental illness are not a problem in the city. What you don't see doesn't exist for some people. And that's unfortunately part of the reason that I don't see Anchorage fixing these problems that it has. When people don't see what they don't want to admit, there's no problem to fix. I was also asked why in my previous video I had no footage of homeless people. I'm not going to drive around through homeless camps to record people who are less fortunate than most of us are, like I'm visiting a zoo. And secretly recording someone suffering from a mental illness who's walking down the street just so I get a few more views for my videos is not something I would be proud of putting out there for everyone to see. I only put up the short clips I did in this video because I realized in my previous video I had none, and some people seem to believe that homeless people only exist in places like New York or California. I'm not saying that Anchorage is as bad as New York City. After all, there's about 9 million people who live in New York City compared to under 300,000 who live in Anchorage. Maybe it seems like there are so many homeless people in Anchorage because the city is much smaller than New York City. But whether you go to a convenience store, gas station, Walmart, grocery store, or just walking down the street, you're going to see groups of homeless people sitting around or coming up to you asking if you would like to buy everything and anything that they have in their backpacks. It just feels like it's everywhere. While walking through different parts of Anchorage, I've been offered everything from a cooking pot to beef stew to calling cards to T-bone steaks. So homelessness and drugs is a very big problem in Anchorage, and not just in the evening. But I think even a bigger problem is the mental health crisis that the city of Anchorage seems to ignore. And it couldn't be more obvious that that has happened to a large portion of the homeless community in Anchorage. Another thing I found in Anchorage is so many cars sound like they're driving around without mufflers. And this is coming from someone who likes cars that sound loud. Throughout Alaska, in my opinion, there are a lot of cars on the streets, much louder than in most other states. I've seen minivans that sound louder than locomotives. This isn't really a big negative about Anchorage, but I just don't always like feeling that I'm at the Indy 500 every time I take a walk in Anchorage. The last thing I don't like about Anchorage is unlike in Valdez, where even the people there having hard times would not ask you for a penny. It seems like in Anchorage, most of the people who are not well off or going through hard times will constantly ask you either for food or money or to drive them somewhere for things that aren't important, or just because they're too lazy to walk. It seems to me that in Anchorage, people try a lot harder to take advantage of other people. But in all fairness, I think most cities are like this. It's still something I don't like here. For those who feel like I was too hard on Anchorage or insulted their hometown, look at what I've said up to this point optimistically. I only said 3 bad things that I don't like about Anchorage. That's not that bad. And moving on to the positives of Anchorage, you'll be thrilled to hear that there are more than 3 good things about Anchorage that I'm going to talk about. I do like the mentality of the people living in Anchorage compared to Valdez. In Valdez, there were many more people who were depressed or had a very negative attitude towards life. In Anchorage, even the people going through hard times almost always seem to be happy and positive. Of course, there's depression in Anchorage, but not so much negativity about life. Another good thing about Anchorage is I feel that the grocery prices are actually much lower than I expected. Now, of course, if you shop in their major grocery stores like Carr's or Fred Meyer's, the prices are a little high. But if you shop at Walmart, for example, you may have less variety, but the foods are just as fresh and much cheaper than the bigger stores. The rental prices in Anchorage are high in my opinion, but rental prices are high all over the US these days. Over the past 2 months, I've driven further outside of the city, and whether you drive to Westchester Lagoon or Potter Marsh or Kincaid Park, there are very nice areas close by that make it seem like you're no longer in the city. So Anchorage really has a lot to offer, whether you're someone who just wants to shop in the center or someone who likes to go hiking and spend more time in and around nature. In conclusion, I don't like Anchorage, and I'm happy to leave. There are more reasons I would not like to live in Anchorage than there are reasons why I would prefer to stay here. This is also the reason I'm leaving Anchorage 3 months earlier than I had planned when I arrived in April. The bad simply outweighs the good too much that it's not worth hanging around any longer. Don't be mad at me or don't think I feel that Anchorage is the worst place on earth. I'm not a city lover. I don't like the traffic, the crowds, or the noise. I don't like seeing people sleeping on the streets every day I go out. I don't like seeing people with mental illnesses not getting any help. It's depressing and sad. That's not the type of place I want to call home.